It's resolution time again. Oh boy. I've heard more often this year that people aren't going to make resolutions, because why should we? How can we? We're in the midst of a crisis. What can we do? It is a similar issue that the people of God wrestled with when they found themselves in exile. How did they live out their faith? It was a time of great crisis, faith crisis. They asked some very difficult questions. Where is God? Who is God? Who are they? How do they live together in this new situation? What does it mean to have faith? How are we going to pass on that faith to our children and our grandchildren? How do we live in community? What does God want from us? Sound familiar? One of the things that they do in this time is to remember. And what they discover is that as they look back over their story, it seems that every time they forget to keep the law, they get themselves in trouble. And God has to come and bail them out. And so part of what they do in the midst of the crisis is to focus on keeping the law and rediscovering the real joy that that process can be. But they also remember that God was faithful to his promises, even when we were unfaithful. And that in the end, when we get ourselves into deep doo-doo, God intervenes. As he did when the people found themselves as slaves in Egypt, God sent Moses down to bring them out. God delivered them with a mighty arm and an outstretched hand, led them through the wilderness and into the promised land. And the prophets of the exile will pick up on these themes. And there is hope for a new day, a new life, a return to the way things used to be. And eventually the people of God go back to Jerusalem and Judah, although they find the land not flowing with milk and honey. It's a land in devastation. It looks a lot like much of rural and small-town America these days. It's struggling. It's questioning its survival, economically, politically, socially, religiously. Everything seems to be falling apart. Is there any hope? In the midst of this new crisis, the people struggle and ask more tough questions, not the least of which is how to practice their faith in daily life. What does this Torah, this law, have to do with rebuilding and getting on with life? Is there any connection? Are there any implications that they can draw? And two of the themes that come out of this time are discipline and humility. And they fold back on one another, particularly as we will see as these two themes weave their way into the New Testament. For as we practice discipline, we learn humility. How many of us manage to keep our New Year's resolutions? As Paul says, he does the things that he knows he shouldn't, and he never gets around to doing the things he knows he should. That's why for the last 20 years, my New Year's resolution is to lose 20 pounds. Yeah, we all know how that goes. It's humbling, because I realize I can't do it on my own. It is only by the grace of God and the love and support of others. It will be these themes of discipline and humility that will be picked up by the gospel writers as they tell the story of Jesus' life and teachings. It will be central themes in Paul and in the latter part of the New Testament. For once again, there is crisis. Another temple is destroyed, and the world is on the verge of exploding. Perhaps in this time of crisis, it might not be a bad thing for us as we ponder our resolutions to think about our disciplines, our faith practices. Is there a way that we can be more disciplined in our reading of Scripture, our prayer life, our generosity, our devotion and worship, our caring of neighbor? All the while recognizing that this is a humbling discipline to take on, and that we will learn much about ourselves and God and neighbor. We will learn about the grace of God. For as Paul reminds us, we've all fallen short of the discipline and the law. It is only by God's grace that we dare to stand before him. It is humility that we will learn before our neighbors. Instead of being haughty in faith and quick with the handout, we recognize that we are in this together and that we need each other. Discipline and humility. Not a bad pair to resolve to keep for 2021. And who knows, along the way, we may even grow in our love for God and our love of neighbor. And isn't that what we're supposed to be about?